What are you saying?
Rolling.
Rolling?
Yeah.
So what do you want me to tell you about Aretha?
Well, how you got her in your building and everything, yeah.
Well, first of all, give me a second. I guess I'm losing it.
Well, first off, is there any specific story that how you bought the building?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that. Give me a second. What am I trying to remember? Trying to remember, not Aretha. The family that owned the house were the Fulton Cuttings. That was their family name. And they owned 75 feet empty property from 88th Street to 89th Street. Okay? And they built 3 houses on 89th Street and 1 house on 88th Street, which was 15 East. And they had a 50-foot garden that the family shared. Then over a period of time, as the people died off, they sold the 3 buildings on 89th Street, and they became St. David's, a Catholic, very expensive Catholic boys' school. And the house on 88th Street was still being lived in by the widow, Fulton Cutting, and they had this 50 feet of empty land that they sold, and the people who bought it built a shitty apartment house there.
Duh.
When I came along and I saw this ad in the paper, and how did I do that? Oh, I got an appointment to see the house. And I went and I looked through the house, and there was a table in the foyer with the cover of the top of the table, which was about 2.5, 3 feet by maybe 15 inches, was full of real estate realtors' cards. That many people had come to look at the house to buy it, to offer it for sale.
Right.
And as it happened, I was going with Sandra Hockman at the time, and Sandra knew the Fulton Cuttings, the family.
Yeah.
Her generation. And so when I got involved with it, I was able to say that I heard about it, not through a broker, although I had heard about it through a broker, and that I had heard about it by a personal friend. Anyway, I put the deposit down. Oh, I needed $33,000 for a deposit. I had no money, because by that time I had bought 5 or 6 other buildings, and I had no money to begin with. I was borrowing from every place I could. Anyway, this was my 6th building I was buying. So I called Sam Cooper, who was a money lender, and I said, Sam, I need $33,000, 10%, to put it down for a deposit for a house I'm buying. And I wanted to borrow it from him. Now, Sam was Mr. 2%. If you borrowed money from him, he was charging 2% interest per month. 24% interest. Very high interest. That was okay. So Sam said, I'll lend you the $33,000, but in order for me to lend you the $33,000, you have to give me 10,000 in cash. You understand?
Yeah,
I would
that's a
own
down payment.
33, but he was only showing 22 by check. So now I had it down to raising $10,000 in order to buy the mansion. And I had a friend, I was living at 522 East 82nd Street, and that was a brownstone, and I had a little front yard. I mean, it was, it wasn't a yard, it was just, the building was set back 10 feet. And so I had a motorcycle in those days, and I used to put it in there. And there was a guy on my block who lived across the street who also had a motorcycle, who was parking it from one side to the other. His name was Charlie Marshall. And we got to know each other because we both had bikes. And one day I said, Charlie, I said, put your bike here in my front areaway, which is not on the, I had the 10 foot or so by 20 feet beside the entrance. Then there was this fenced in area. So he would come and put his bike there. Now, when I had this deal going with trying to buy 88th Street, I had to raise $10,000 in cash. So at some point, I was talking to Charlie, and somehow I brought up the thing about needing money, and Charlie said, "I'll lend you the money." I said, "Well," that would really be very valuable. Would you do that? He says, "Yeah." He says, "I'll meet you at the bank tomorrow, blah, 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 and I'll arrange it." So I meet him at the bank. He writes out a check for $10,000. He hands it to me, and I hand it to the bank officer. I said, "Will you cash this? I want it in cash."
Yeah.
And the woman thought I was crazy. I endorsed it, handed it to her. She went down, came up with $10,000 in cash. Now I go to the contract closing for 88th Street, and Sam Cooper is with me. And I've already given him the $10,000 in cash, so he's going to write me a check for $33,500, whatever it was. And during that meeting, Sam was being a pain in the ass. He was asking all kinds of questions to the guy. I said, "Sam, you're going to break this fucking deal. Stop doing that." Sam was just very hard-nosed about it. Anyway, we signed the contract. So now I'm in contract. Now I'm trying to find someone to rent the house because I can't afford to carry the house. I have too much going on. And at some point, a broker brings Aretha to the house.
Aretha Franklin.
Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a housekeeper still living in the house who had been a valet to Mr. Fulton Cutting. He had been with him when he went to Harvard and throughout his life until Fulton Cutting died.
Right.
But he was still a valet in the house for Mrs. Cutting. So I couldn't get there. Aretha had seen the house, gone away, and now they called me and they said she wants to come and see it again. So I couldn't get there. So I called him up and I said, "James," I said, "Aretha Franklin is coming back to see the house again, and I can't get there in time to show her the house.
Right.
Would you be good enough to let her walk through the house again?" He says, "Who are you talking about?" I said, "Aretha Franklin, the woman that looked at the house a few days ago." And this black guy, who wasn't very black, but he was black, says to me, "Oh, you mean that colored woman?" Anyway, so Aretha moved in, and for 3 years, the top 2 floors, She rented everything but the top 2 floors. There were 6 floors. 6 floors, 2 cellars. So she rented the first 4 floors and the basement, the cellar. So she had 5 floors. I had 2 on top that I was renovating. So I'd be going back and forth with workers, whatever, going upstairs, renovating the apartment. And of course, everybody in the neighborhood who saw me running around thought I was a janitor, not that I was the owner of the building. Anyway, but James, speaking of Aretha as being that colored woman, almost put me on the floor. Yeah, those were interesting times.
Aye.
Then I would come in the house and I would see Aretha. She'd be in the library. And it was a 25-footer, not like this. This was a very serious house. And it was wall-to-wall, just like here, wall-to-wall bookcases. But the room was not 16 feet wide or 14 and a half, whatever this is. It was 25 feet wide. So it was a very serious room. And somebody said that when they saw that library, they said this is the kind of room that a Secretary of State should write his memoirs in. Anyway, but she was very quiet. She was always sitting in the library. They had bought furniture, and she was there alone. And I would come in and out, fixing things, whatever. I was the handyman. And so I would see quite a bit of her. I wouldn't bother her. You know, we hardly ever talked. Hello, goodbye. But she had a husband or a lover she was living with. Kenny, his name was. And Kenny and I got on very well. And in fact, Kenny, I was going skiing. In those days, Bob Sahagan had a ski house up in Vermont. So I would go there for the weekend skiing. And on one occasion, Kenny, Aretha's lover, wanted to come and go skiing. Black guy. He wasn't so black, but I mean, he was black. And he and Aretha had a child together whose name was Kiefer, Kenny and Franklin Kiefer. Aretha already had 3 children, 3 sons before that, and now with Kenny she had this baby, Kiefer, who was Kenny's child. And Kenny wanted to come skiing. So I told him where the house was and how to get there and gave him all the instructions. And sometime over the weekend, on a Friday night, I get a phone call from Kenny. He's in Vermont, but the car broke down. He's about 50 miles away from Bob and Hoodig's house. So I got in the car with Bob. We drove down there, picked up Kenny, brought him to the house. He spent 2 days with us skiing, whatever. They got the car fixed, the limousine they had. Now, in the process, you got it right. One day I was with Annie's mother, my mother-in-law, and she said something about that we were living in a house with blacks. And I said, blacks? Who are you talking about? And then I realized she's talking about Aretha. I said, you know, that black woman has a limousine double parked at the sidewalk all day long in case she wants to go out. All day. A chauffeur sitting in the car, just sitting there, doing nothing. But if Aretha wanted to go out, whatever. And then there would be young people standing in front of the house, waiting, hoping that Aretha would come out. I would see them all the time. And they would ask me, and I'd say, yeah, she does. She lives here, but you're not going to see her. She ain't coming out. Whatever. But for my mother-in-law to say that you have blacks living in your house, somehow that was a put-down, right? Yes, the blacks. Yeah, I have a black that has a limousine with a chauffeur in it, 12, 14 hours a day in case she wants to go out.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was another life. And then when I divorced honey, she made me sell the house.
Oh. Need help?
No. That was a heartbreaker.
Wait, how did she make you sell the house? I'm confused how that works.
Well, when I divorced her, she got a settlement of $1 million something,
Jesus.
and so the only way I could raise the money was I had to sell the house.
Hmm.
It wasn't a nice divorce because she did things in the divorce that didn't help her. It only hurt me.
Uh-huh.
Like selling 88th Street, for example.
Sure.
Whatever.